going to try to look at the data to see whether your suggestions are going to be evidence-based and backed up by the research that we have about the sorts of environmental applications that can change physical activity. But before we do that, we need a framework or kind of like a theory to be able to look at those interventions and categorize them to see which ones are having a big effect and which ones aren't. The paper that we're using today uses what's called the Angelo Framework, which classifies interventions based on whether they're micro interventions or macro interventions. Are they based on a particular setting, or are they based more generally on a whole sector? So a micro intervention might be something that happens just in the CBD or just in a particular area, whereas a macro intervention might be a state or a national intervention. And then it breaks the environment up into 4 different areas, which all may theoretically influence someone's physical activity. There's their physical environment, which could be micro. It could just be the natural environment around that particular walk or that particular park, or a macro physical environment, living in Scandinavia in winter where there's only a certain number of hours of sun per day. These are what are called macro physical factors, and they may influence whether someone's physically active or not. Socio-cultural environment is the human factors that might influence physical activity. Living in a culture where everyone's focused on physical activity and sport might lead to different influences, a bit like we've talked about with the theory of planned behavior and with our social influences lecture. But that can happen on a micro level that we've talked about so far, but also on a macro societal level about how that influences people's physical activity. And maybe that's a good predictor and something that we can change or that a government can influence. The economic environment might influence physical activity as well. We know that some people don't commute by car because they can't afford it. Some people prefer to walk or ride their bikes because it's cheaper. This can happen on a micro level where an individual's environmental circumstances might influence their behavior, but also on a macro level. What would happen to rates of physical activity if you raised or lowered public transport fees across the state? And the political environment refers to the rules that apply either to a certain area, like a micro rule, like maybe a rule that's governed by the university, or a macro governmental rule that could be determined by the state government or the national government. All of these could influence different types of physical activity as well. So to check your understanding of these different types of components that might influence physical activity within the Angelo Framework, I want you to have a look at this video and then try to identify which of the factors match which of the components of the Angelo Framework.